The lion does not announce the hunt. It does not post about the preparation. It does not share the strategy. It does not seek validation from the other animals before it moves. It does not need anyone to believe in the hunt before the hunt begins. It does not require the acknowledgement of the result before the result exists. It simply hunts, in silence, with complete focus, with the kind of total commitment that has no space in it for performance because all the available space is occupied by the work. And then it wins, without announcement, without fanfare, without the dramatic reveal that the watching world was informed enough to appreciate. It simply wins, because winning was always the only point, not the performance of pursuing, not the identity of someone who hunts, the actual result of the actual hunt. That is what this conversation is about. Not the aesthetic of hustle, not the performance of grind, not the identity of someone who works hard and posts about it and builds a following around the fact that they are building. The actual thing, the quiet, relentless, unannounced, unremarkable from the outside work that produces results so real they cannot be argued with. Results that arrive not with a dramatic announcement, but with the quiet certainty of something that was always going to happen because of the work that nobody saw. Hustle in silence. Win without announcement. That is the entire formula. And for the next hour, I am going to tell you exactly what it means to actually live it. Not to admire it, not to feel inspired by the concept of it, to actually live it in your specific life, with your specific goals, in the specific conditions that currently exist for you, starting from wherever you are right now. Because the person who understands this principle and applies it, who genuinely, consistently, without exception, brings the silent hustle to every day, regardless of whether the winning is visible yet, that person becomes something that the performing world simply does not produce. Something rarer, something more durable, something that the noise cannot create and cannot take away. Let us begin. The first thing I want to establish is why silence is not just a personality preference, but a performance multiplier. Why the person who hustles in silence is not just doing the same work more privately. They are doing fundamentally different work with fundamentally different results. When you remove the performance layer from your hustle, when you stop announcing and sharing and documenting and seeking validation, something changes in the quality of the effort itself. Not immediately, not in a way that is measurable on day one, but over time in a way that becomes undeniable. The work done without an audience is purer, not more virtuous in a moral sense, more concentrated in a practical one. Every unit of energy that would have gone into managing the performance, maintaining the narrative, responding to the feedback, adjusting the presentation, all of that energy is redirected into the actual work, the actual building, the actual development of the capability or the result that the hustle is supposed to produce. Think about what you spend when you perform your hustle publicly. You spend time creating the content that documents the work. You spend energy managing the response, the positive responses that require acknowledgement, the negative ones that require either deflection or engagement. You spend cognitive bandwidth maintaining consistency between the narrative you have built around your hustle and the reality of where the hustle actually is on any given day. You spend emotional resources dealing with the gap between the engagement you expected and the engagement you received, between the validation you hoped for and the validation that arrived. All of that is real. All of it costs something. And all of it comes from the same finite pool of daily energy that the actual work requires. The silent hustler has all of that back, every bit of it,
redirected entirely into the thing that the noise was distracting from. And the compound effect of that redirection, over weeks, over months, over the extended period that real transformation requires, is staggering. Not in any single day, but in the accumulated weight of all the days. More of the available energy into the work, less into the performance of the work. More results, less documentation of the pursuit of results. This is not complicated, it is mathematical, and the mathematics favors silence overwhelmingly. Now, let me talk about something that most conversations about working in silence skip over: the internal experience of it, what it actually feels like to hustle without the performance layer. Because the principle is easy to endorse and genuinely difficult to implement. And the difficulty is mostly internal, mostly in the relationship between you and the absence of external validation. Human beings are social animals. We evolved in small groups where social recognition was directly connected to survival. The approval of the group was not just emotionally desirable, it was functionally necessary. And the systems in our brain that generate the desire for social recognition, the systems that make the sharing of accomplishments feel rewarding and the withholding of them feel like deprivation, those systems are not optional. They are ancient and powerful and do not care about your current goals or your understanding of why silence serves those goals better than performance. So when you commit to hustling in silence, you are committing to something that your brain will fight against. Not because your brain is wrong about the value of social recognition in general, but because it has not updated its calculations to account for the specific context of your current building season. The context in which the short-term reward of social validation is directly competing with the long-term reward of genuine transformation, and in which, uniquely in this specific season, the long-term reward can only be built by foregoing the short-term one. Understanding this makes the fight easier. Not easy, easier. When the urge to share arrives, and it will arrive reliably, especially when the work is going well and the progress is real and the desire to be seen making progress is at its strongest, you can recognize it for what it is, not a sign that the sharing is appropriate, a sign that the brain is doing its job, seeking the social reward it is built to seek. And you can observe it without acting on it. You can feel the pull and choose the silence anyway. Because you understand that the pull is the brain's short game, and you are playing the long one. Every time you choose the silence over the share, every time the urge to perform arrives and you return instead to the work, you strengthen something. Not just the discipline of silence, the muscle of delayed gratification, the capacity to forego the immediate reward in favor of the real one. And that capacity, built through the repeated daily practice of choosing the work over the performance, is one of the most valuable things a human being can develop.
Because it applies everywhere, to every domain where the short-term comfortable option is competing with the long-term important one. The person who has built genuine capacity for delayed gratification, built it through practice, through the daily choice of the work over the performance, is operating with an advantage in every area of their life that the person dependent on immediate rewards simply does not have. Hustle in silence. Build the muscle of the long game. Let the compounding do what compounding does. Now, I want to talk about what the silent hustle actually looks like in the daily texture of a real life, because I do not want this to be a conversation about principles that sounds compelling and produces nothing. I want it to be a conversation about behaviors, specific, daily, implementable behaviors that constitute the actual practice of hustling in silence. The silent hustle starts before the world does, before the notifications arrive, before the demands of other people's days have had a chance to colonize your attention.
In the quiet hours, the hours that belong entirely to you because nobody else is awake yet to claim them, the work begins. Not announced, not documented, just begun. This is the first and most important behavior of the silent hustler, the commitment to giving the first and best energy of the day to the work that matters most. Not to the inbox, not to the social feed, not to the reactive demands that will multiply as the day advances, to the thing, the actual building, the specific, daily, nobody else is watching work that moves the important thing forward. The silent hustle continues through the day with a quality of focus that the performing hustler never quite achieves. Because when you are not managing a public narrative about your work, you can be fully present in the work itself, not partially in the work and partially in the thinking about how to present the work, not doing the thing and simultaneously designing the content that will document the thing, just in the thing, completely, with the full quality of attention that the thing deserves and that only the silent worker can give it. This quality of presence, this full immersion in the work without the distraction of the performance layer, produces a different quality of output, not always immediately visible in terms of quantity, but visible over time in terms of depth, in the kind of work that can only be produced by someone who was fully there when producing it, who was not splitting their attention between the experience and the documentation of the experience. The silent hustle includes the hard days with the same consistency as the good ones, because the silent hustler is not working for the optics of consistency. They're not maintaining the appearance of daily discipline for the benefit of an audience that is evaluating their follow-through. They are maintaining actual consistency because the actual result requires it, because the compound effect does not care about the story of consistency, it cares about the reality of it. And on the hard days, the days when the motivation is absent and the energy is low and the work feels pointless and the temptation to stop is genuine, the silent hustler has a different internal landscape than the performer. The performer's motivation is partially dependent on the external environment, on whether the work is being seen, being recognized, generating the engagement that validates the effort. When that external validation is absent or insufficient, the motivation structure is weakened. The silent hustler's motivation is entirely internal. It depends only on the understanding of what the work is building and the commitment to continue building it regardless of whether anyone is watching. And internal motivation, when it is genuine, when it is rooted in a real understanding of the stakes and a real commitment to the result, is more resilient than external motivation on precisely the days when resilience matters most. The hard days, the invisible days, the days when nobody would know if you stopped. Do the work on those days, especially those days, because those days are where the real separation happens between the performer who continues when the performance is rewarding and stops when it is not, and the silent hustler who continues because the work is required, because the result demands it, because stopping is not an option that the genuine commitment to the win allows. Now, I want to talk about what winning without announcement actually means, because I think this part of the principle is as important as the silence itself and is not always understood in its full depth. Winning without announcement is not modesty, it is not false humility, it is not the performance of not performing, the conspicuous quietness of someone who wants to be noticed for not seeking attention. That is just a different form of the same performance. Winning without announcement is the genuine absence of the need for the announcement. It is the internal state of a person who has built something real and whose relationship with that reality does not require the external confirmation of other people's awareness of it, whose measure of the win is the actual result, not the social recognition of the result. This internal state is not natural for most people. It is built through the practice of valuing results over recognition, through the repeated experience of achieving something without announcing it and discovering that the achievement is complete whether anyone knows about it or not, through the gradual, practice-based development of internal metrics for success that do not depend on external validation. And here is why this matters beyond the philosophical. The person whose measure of success is internal, whose relationship with their own results does not require the validation of an audience, is free in a way that the recognition-dependent person is not. They are free to pursue things that will not be recognized, to build things that the current culture does not value, to work in directions that make no social sense in the short term, but that compound into something extraordinary in the long term. The recognition-dependent person cannot do this. They are constrained to the domains where their work will be seen and validated, where the performance will generate the response that their motivation depends on. And that constraint is limiting, profoundly, practically, life-shrinkingly limiting. The person who is one without announcement, who has built something real and internalized its value without needing the world to confirm it, is free of that constraint. They can build in any direction. They can work on anything. They can pursue the long, slow, socially unimpressive compound growth of something genuinely significant without the need for the social validation that would require a more immediately impressive trajectory. That freedom is among the most valuable things the silent hustle builds, not just the result, the independence from the need for the result to be seen.
Let me talk about what happens when the winning eventually becomes visible, because it does. Not always on the timeline you would prefer, not always in the form you imagined, but the work done in silence, maintained with consistency, sustained through the invisible season, that work produces results. And results, at a certain level of genuine significance, eventually become visible, regardless of whether they were announced. And this is where something interesting happens, where the person who hustled in silence experiences a specific quality of arrival that the person who performed their hustle never does. When the silent hustler's work becomes visible, when the transformation is undeniable, when the result is real, when the capability is evident to everyone who encounters it, the response from the world is different from the response that public hustle generates. Not just quantitatively different, qualitatively different. Because the world did not watch it being built. The world did not receive the daily updates. The world did not participate in the performance of the process. And so when the result arrives, fully formed, undeniable, impossible to attribute to luck or timing or the favorable attention of a supportive audience, it lands with a different weight. It lands as proof, as evidence, as the specific, unargued-with quality of something that was clearly built through work that nobody saw, and therefore cannot be attributed to anything other than the actual work, the discipline that nobody documented, the effort that nobody validated, the consistency that nobody tracked. That proof has a credibility that public hustle documentation never achieves, because public hustle documentation is always slightly suspect, always possibly performed as much as genuine, always carrying the question of whether the work would have happened without the audience. The silent hustle's result carries none of that suspicion, because there was no audience, there was only the work, and the result is its own answer to the question of whether the work was real. This is the specific power of winning without announcement. Not just that the win arrives, but what the win means when it does, what it says about the person who produced it, what it proves about the quality and consistency of the effort that preceded it. The silent hustle builds the win, and the win, arrived at through the silent hustle, says something about you that years of documented public effort never could. I want to spend time on the specific domains where the silent hustle produces its most powerful results, where the combination of genuine effort and strategic silence creates the conditions for the kind of transformation that changes the entire trajectory of a life. The first domain is professional development, the building of career capital, the accumulation of the skills, the knowledge, the track record, the reputation, not the performed reputation, the earned one, that determines what options are available to you professionally.
Most people approach their professional development through the lens of visibility. Who can see what they are doing? Who is aware of their effort? Who is in a position to reward their performance? And this visibility orientation produces a specific kind of professional behavior, the behaviors that are most likely to be noticed, the work that photographs best, the contributions that can be most easily attributed and acknowledged. But the professional development that actually builds career capital, the deep skill development, the unglamorous capability building, the patient accumulation of expertise in domains that take years to genuinely master, that development is mostly invisible in the short term. It does not generate the recognition that the visibility-oriented professional is seeking. It generates competence. And competence, not performance, is what eventually creates the options that matter. The silent hustler in the professional domain invests in the competence every day without the distraction of managing visibility, without the energy expenditure of performing professionalism for the people who might be evaluating it, with full investment in the actual building of what the professional life will eventually be built on. And years later, when the competence is genuine, when the capability is real, when the expertise has compounded into something that genuinely differentiates, the professional options available are not the ones that the visibility game produces. They are better because they are based on something real rather than something performed. The second domain is entrepreneurial building, the creation of something new, a business, a project, a product, a service, a creative work, anything that starts from nothing and is built into something through the sustained effort of someone who believed in it before the world did. Entrepreneurial building is perhaps the domain where the silent hustle principle is most obviously applicable and most widely violated, because the culture of entrepreneurship has become deeply performance-oriented, the build-in-public movement, the documenting of every stage of the journey, the audience building that is supposed to create the market before the product is ready, the transparency that is supposed to build trust and accountability and a community of early supporters. Some of this has genuine value, but much of it is a trap. The trap of building for the audience rather than for the result, of optimizing for engagement with the process rather than progress in the actual building, of creating content about building a business instead of building the business. The silent hustler builds the thing, not the narrative around the thing, not the audience for the thing before the thing exists. The thing, the product that actually works, the service that actually delivers, the business model that actually generates value. And they do this quietly, in private, with full investment in the substance rather than the story. And when the thing is built, when it actually works, when it actually delivers, when it is actually ready, they bring it to the world, not as the dramatic reveal of a journey that has been documented, as the quiet arrival of something that is genuinely useful. And genuinely useful things do not require manufactured audiences. They build real ones through the simple, unglamorous, entirely reliable mechanism of actually working. Build the thing in silence. Let the thing announce itself when it is ready. The third domain is personal transformation, the work of becoming different in some fundamental way, the building of a different body, a different financial life, a different relationship with yourself and your own capabilities. Personal transformation is simultaneously the most intimate and the most publicly performed category of human development. The before and after photographs, the transformation journey documentation, the accountability posts and the progress updates, and the vulnerable sharing of the struggle, all of it performed for an audience that is supposed to provide the motivation to continue.
But genuine personal transformation, the kind that lasts, the kind that is permanent rather than cyclical, the kind that changes the person rather than just the behavior, happens in private. It happens in the specific, daily, nobody-is-watching moments when the choice between the old pattern and the new one is in front of you, when the decision is purely yours, when there is no audience to perform the better choice for and no performance motivation to supplement the internal one. Those moments are where the transformation is won or lost, not in the public documentation, in the private decision. And the person who is building their transformation for an audience is, in those private moments, slightly less prepared than the person who has been building it entirely for themselves. Because the private moments do not offer the performance motivation, they only offer the internal one. And if the internal motivation has not been built and sustained and grown independent of the external one, the private moments are where the pattern snaps back. Build the transformation in silence. Build the motivation for it internally, so that every moment, the public ones and the private ones, the witnessed ones and the unwatched ones, is powered by the same genuine internal commitment rather than a mix of internal and external that fails when the external is absent. Now, I want to talk about something practical: the execution of the silent hustle in a world that is specifically designed to make silence difficult. A world that has built the most sophisticated attention capture technologies in human history and deployed them in the device you carry everywhere. A world where the default mode of every social platform is visibility, sharing, performance, where the entire infrastructure of modern digital life is built on the assumption that you want to share your experience and that sharing it is always a good idea. How do you actually hustle in silence in this world? Not as a spiritual retreat from technology, as a daily, practical, sustainable practice in the actual conditions of modern life. The first practical element is the morning protection. Before the phone is touched, before the feed is checked, before the digital world has had access to your attention, the work begins. 30 minutes minimum, 1 hour ideally, in which the silence is absolute and the work is total. This morning window is protected not because it is a nice ritual, but because it is the highest quality cognitive time you have, and giving it to the work before giving it to anything else is the single most impactful thing you can do for the quality of your silent hustle. The second practical element is the deliberate absence of broadcast. The specific daily decision not to share the work before it is finished, not to post the progress, not to announce the pursuit. This is not a permanent state, it is a seasonal one. For the duration of the building, for the months or years that the silent hustle requires, the sharing is deferred, not abandoned, deferred, until the result is real enough to speak for itself. The third practical element is the environment design, the specific arrangement of your digital and physical environment to reduce the friction of the hustle and increase the friction of the performance. The phone in another room during the work hours, the notifications off during the focused building time, the social apps removed from the home screen so that checking them requires a deliberate action rather than an automatic one. These are not dramatic interventions, they are the small architectural decisions that, compounded across every day of the building season, significantly reduce the energy expenditure on the performance layer and increase the energy available for the work. The fourth practical element is the internal accounting, the private record of the work, not public documentation, but private tracking, the journal that nobody reads, the record of what was done and what was built and what was learned, the internal acknowledgement of progress that replaces the external validation you are not seeking. Because the human need to have the work witnessed does not disappear when you choose silence, it needs to be met by the only witness who will always be there and who has access to the full truth of the effort: yourself. Be your own most honest witness. Track the work privately. Acknowledge the progress internally. Let the internal record be as honest and as detailed and as genuinely validating as the public documentation would have been. And let it be enough, because it is enough. It is more than enough. It is the only validation that is completely accurate and completely yours. Let me talk now about the kind of person who comes out of a genuine season of silent hustle, not as an abstract ideal, as the specific qualities and capabilities that the process actually builds. The person who emerges from a real season of silent hustle has a different relationship with their own work than the person who has been performing it. They know what the work actually required. They have the full internal record of every difficult day, every moment of doubt, every time the motivation was absent and the work happened anyway.
They are not subject to the imposter syndrome that plagues many publicly successful people, the fear that the result is better than the effort that produced it, because they have the complete private record of exactly what the effort was. They have a different relationship with recognition, not an aversion to it, an independence from it. The recognition, when it arrives, is welcome but not necessary, because the work was done and the result was produced without it. And the knowledge that the result exists independent of the recognition, that it was built in the silence and does not require the noise to validate it, gives the person a relationship with their own accomplishments that recognition-dependent achievement never produces. They have a different relationship with the next challenge because they have direct experience, not theoretical but lived, of being able to build something real without an audience, without validation, without the external structure of accountability and recognition. They know they can do this because they have done it, and that knowledge, that lived, embodied, evidenced knowledge of their own capacity for sustained, silent effort is the most powerful kind of confidence available. The kind that does not depend on the current environment being favorable, that does not require encouragement or witnesses or the optimal conditions for performance. The kind that just works, in any conditions, for as long as the work requires. That is who you are building. Through every day of the silent hustle, through every choice of the work over the performance, through every morning protected from the noise and given to the building, through every result produced without announcement and every win achieved without fanfare. You are building the version of yourself that does not need the world's permission to be great, that does not require the world's awareness to maintain the effort, that does not depend on the world's recognition to know the value of what has been built. That version of you is not given, it is earned. Through exactly the kind of daily, consistent, unglamorous, nobody-is-watching work that the silent hustle requires. So here is where I leave you, not with a summary, but with a challenge. The next time you complete a meaningful piece of work, the next time you finish something that your instinct says should be shared, that your brain is reaching for the phone to document, that the habit of performance is priming you to announce, do not share it. Just know it, internally, privately, with the full weight of having done it without the performance. Let that knowing be enough, just for now, just for this season, just long enough to discover that the work done without an audience is the same work, that the result produced without announcement is the same result, that the progress made without documentation is the same progress, and that the person doing the work, the one who keeps showing up in the silence, who keeps building without broadcast, who keeps choosing the real over the performed, that person is becoming something that the performing world does not produce. Something real, something durable, something that does not need to be announced because it cannot be denied. Hustle in silence. Win without announcement. Let the results be the loudest voice that there is. Now, go to work, in the silence, where the real winning happens.